Hey, everybody out there with us once again is Bryant Thomas, lately of the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C. Bryant is currently living in New Hampshire, where I once lived in the news business. And the topic is, New Hampshire may lose its spot as a first in the nation primary state. And Bryant, I don't think your fellow New Hampshireites are very happy about that right now.
Well, no, it's only for Democrats. The Republicans have not said anything about this whatsoever.
Right.
And they're already in a snit about this. Most of the top Democrats in the state, Senators Shaheen and Hassan, are both howling about this, along with the two Congress people we have.
All right, let's get a little background first, how this has come about. It's on Joe Biden's recommendation to the Democratic National Committee that South Carolina now becomes the first Democratic primary state. And of course, written all over that is a cynical move to give Biden an early boost in the primary season. And don't forget, it was Jim Clyburn, the House whip, that really engineered the presidency for Joe Biden by endorsing him in the South Carolina primary. Before that, he was almost out of the running. He'd lost New Hampshire, he lost Iowa, he lost Nevada. He was almost down and out. Then comes South Carolina and Jim Clyburn, who endorses him. Voila, he wins the South Carolina primary. And within a week or so, all the other Democrat candidates drop out, coalesce around Biden, and he becomes the nominee. So this is a cynical move, is it not?
Well, there's little doubt about that. Biden asked the Democratic National Committee to do exactly that, and for that very reason, because he knows he's got a much better chance of prevailing with a big splash if he goes into South Carolina first. Now, having said that, the only incumbent president to ever lose the New Hampshire primary was Harry Truman. Incumbent president, not nominee, incumbent president.
Yeah.
And that didn't hurt him. He went on to win in 1948. So I don't know how much you can read into this, except to say that the New Hampshire Democratic machine wants to keep this as is. And in previous years, they've always moved the primary if they had to make sure they were number one. They waited until, excuse me, everybody in the country had firm dates for their primaries, and then New Hampshire at the very last minute made theirs earlier. One year it was on January 8th.
It's a state law in New Hampshire now that
Correct.
they have to be the first in the nation primary, correct?
That's correct. And they're not going to back down on this.
So how is this going to play out then?
Well, look, if push comes to shove, Joe Biden is not going to ignore New Hampshire. That would be stupid, especially if the Republicans are going to go ahead and have their primary on the same day. Why would Biden cede all of that attention to the Republicans and just bank everything he has on South Carolina? I don't see that happening. I think in the end, Biden will probably be forced to enter the New Hampshire primary.
Well, no, I mean, he knows he's going to be strong in South Carolina with Jim Clyburn's help once again. So why not move it to South Carolina and ignore New Hampshire, where he's not nearly as strong?
Well, look, he's still the top dog in New Hampshire right now. He outpolls Trump in New Hampshire in straw polls already by a sizable margin, 8 or 10 points. So I don't think he's the candidate that we saw in 2020, simply because of his incumbency. So, any incumbent is going to do better in a primary than a challenger. We know that, or someone who is not, an incumbent.
But in terms of early momentum, a big win in South Carolina, which is practically guaranteed, is going to propel him much more quickly towards the nomination during the primary season. Would it not?
I would say yes, but we don't know what the other states are going to do. Other states may move their primaries around just to have, better positioning to say, we're going to be next after South Carolina. So we don't know who's going to jockey for what. And I think that's important to point out that that's a variable we don't know yet.
So this could become a big scramble then. Now, also just concentrating on New Hampshire for now, if what counter move could the Democratic National Committee make if New Hampshire doesn't cooperate? They merely won't register the primary results. I mean, they'd invalidate the primary, correct?
Well, I don't know if it would invalidate, Joe Biden has to sign legislation or paperwork to become a candidate in New Hampshire. There's a deadline for that. And if he doesn't, he's not on the ballot. And I can't conceive of his not doing that. That would be really, really odd.
But the Democratic National Committee has it in its power to not accept the results of the New Hampshire primary, correct? Or not accept whatever the results are if New Hampshire doesn't cooperate. I mean, how would that work?
Well, if Biden's not on the ballot, it's a moot point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. My suspicion is this will shake down, and New Hampshire will again move its primary to its earliest point in 2024 as it possibly can to maintain its position as first in the nation primary.
And you think Biden and the Democratic National Committee will go along with that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, look, if they start doing polling in New Hampshire, and Biden looks good, and don't forget, Biden doesn't have any Democratic opposition yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if Biden is the kingmaker here in all of this, it doesn't really matter. All he's got to do is win the primary by a comfortable margin to show that he's still going to be viable in the general election, which is the purpose of his primary to begin with.
Yeah, but again, I get back to the fact that South Carolina would present a much bigger win for him, which translates into that early boost, the early momentum. So why would he not stick with that rather than backtracking with New Hampshire?
Well, I think he wants to do that. That's obvious because he asked the Democratic National Committee to do it.
Right.
So I don't think there's any doubt about what Biden wants. Whether he gets what he wants in the end is what's up for grabs right now. I don't know that he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, we should probably, we both have a history in New Hampshire, and we're both familiar with how this all started and why it's so important to New Hampshire to be the first in the nation, because it gives them, it puts them on the map politically and nationally every 4 years. And it gives them a sense of importance, and it does give them some say in who's going to be the next president, because those early results are poured over by everybody, analyzed, and they take on a significance perhaps beyond the numbers of voters in New Hampshire. So they're not going to give up that status very easily. I mean, this is a big deal to them. And you're saying already that there's quite a bit of dissension going on.
Oh, and you know what? Keep in mind that all of the New Hampshire cable television networks are using Boston media. There isn't just New Hampshire media that's on the New Hampshire cable systems. It's loaded with Boston stuff because it's our grade B signal. So take a look at the money that is involved in campaigning for everybody who comes up here.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 2020, when we had all those Democratic candidates, it was an incredible windfall for the media in Boston and New Hampshire. Less so this time, especially if Biden is the only nominee, the only candidate on the Democratic side. But the Republicans are going to have a lot of people who are interested, assuming Trump survives all of this. DeSantis is going to come in here, and there may be others who will suddenly come out of the woodwork if it turns out that Trump cannot run. So there's a lot of variables here that nobody knows yet.
The fact that Biden is pushing for this, the change in the first primary date, does that indicate to you strongly that he is going to run again for re-election?
Sure. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think, there's no big Democrat that I see on the horizon who could pick up the cudgel and do as much in the voting booth as Biden can do. Now, does that mean Biden has been an A1 president? Of course not. But the issue is, who have they got better? And I don't see anybody better yet.
Well, what I see looming here is his cognitive deterioration, which I think is increasingly obvious. Can he really make it another 2 years?
Well, we'll soon find out. I mean, I think there's legitimacy to what you say. He is, 80-ish, and I think that he does do things that indicate some question about his senility. But when he's on, he's on. I mean, I think that, if you look at the overall performance of Biden in public, rather than just the snippets that Fox News wants you to look at to show him in an embarrassing position, then I think you come to the conclusion that this guy still has much going on between his ears.
See, but Brian, I take the opposite view of that. His lapses are very telling and increasingly obvious. So again, to me, it's an open question whether he can make it to the next 2 years for re-election. But getting back to the New Hampshire primary, I was working in New Hampshire at an independent news station during one of the presidential primary years. And even our independent station, which didn't have a lot of pull, like a Boston station or WMUR, which is the main New Hampshire station, I was interviewing presidential candidates like every other day. I mean, there was so much access to them. And there was a joke in New Hampshire among residents that, they've seen every presidential candidate at least a few times during the season because, they're all over the place. So it's really like down-home politics, which New Hampshire values greatly and doesn't easily give up.
And they love it. They love,
Yeah.
You can say, well, they're crusty because they're tired of all this attention every 4 years. Nonsense. They love it.
Yeah.
They love every minute of it.
Plus the economic boost, right?
Of course. They're looking at hotel rooms for candidates and their staffers and the media hotel rooms. It's a big win for the state of New Hampshire and for areas that are close to New Hampshire in Massachusetts, in northern Massachusetts, places like Lowell and Lawrence and Tewksbury, places that are close to New Hampshire population centers and within a 5 or 10 or 20-minute drive.
Yeah, actually, because of that proximity, the demographics in New Hampshire have been changing because all the transplants from Massachusetts been moving into southern New Hampshire. So it's become a more democratic state, hasn't it? Since
sure.
When he ran the Manchester Union Leader, the big newspaper that dominated the media back then. So that's changed quite a bit.
Oh yeah, and I think with the decline in all newspapers in terms of their propagation and their meaningfulness in the political scheme of things, we've suddenly gravitated to the television to get most of our information about political candidates. And that's not just here, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's elemental that there's going to be an awful lot of pressure on the Democratic National Committee from the congressional delegations, not only in New Hampshire, but also in Massachusetts, to keep this primary going because it means so much money to the media, to the hospitality industry and the media in these two areas. So it isn't just New Hampshire who's upset about this. You're going to see Boston start squawking about this as well. That's easy to figure out.
But with the big guy pushing for a change to South Carolina, what do you predict? How is it going to turn out in the end?
I don't know. I think that they'll you run something up the flagpole and see who salutes. That's what I think this is.
Yeah.
And I think not enough people are going to salute this to make this work. And I think time will tell whether Biden can stick it out and whether he'll say, all right, we tried, but we'll do the New Hampshire thing.
Do you think there might be any permanent damage or divisions widening in the party over this fight?
No, I think Democrats, far and wide, I think, have lost enough elections so that they don't want to start bickering like the Republicans are right now over everything. And I think that's a ticket to oblivion, and they know that. If they've learned one thing from Trump and his minions and the people in the party who are now beginning to break from him, is that when you go to pick up those pieces, you've got to take your appeal to everyone in the party, not just the people that are going to gravitate to you, but you've got to gravitate to people who were Trump supporters and somehow embrace them and get them to become interested in you or someone else if Trump is not in the picture. And that's what's really putting the Republicans in a tailspin right now, is they don't know what Trump's future really is.
Well, not soon, but soon enough, we'll see how it turns out, whether New Hampshire maintains its status as first in the nation primary, which they hold very dear for a number of reasons. Bryant Thomas, a longtime newsman and commentator, most recently with the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C. Thanks once again for being with us.
You bet.